And one of my favorite writers, Karol Markowicz, she has a great piece in the New York Post right now, and it's titled "The CDC's Cruel, Irrational Guidance Traps Our Kids in the Forever Pandemic." Now, Karol specifically talks about camp guidance, and I find this very interesting because the summer is coming. Last year, a lot of these camps were totally canceled. Now kids are being allowed to go back to camp, but there's a catch. Karol, thank you very much for joining the Grace Curley Show.
Hi, Grace. How's it going?
Great. So let's talk a little bit here about the camp guidance specifically. They do have to wear masks, and the vaccinated adults need to wear them as well. But there's also still the 3 feet rule, I believe.
Right. So it's actually 6 feet still. The CDC camp guidelines came out this week, and last week, and it contradicted so many things about previous CDC guidelines. So schools had moved to 3 feet, but camps apparently still are staying at 6 feet. They also said last week that vaccinated adults and also unvaccinated people can be maskless outside, but in the camp guidance, even vaccinated counselors now have to be masked, as do the kids. So it's all very contradictory and doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's sort of what we've come to expect from the CDC.
Right, and I think the part of this story that really, I had messaged Karol earlier, and I said, I'm getting so frustrated just reading this. I don't have kids. I don't have kids that are in summer camp, but this part of your story really hits home. You said, the people making these absurd calls will be sitting in air-conditioned offices while your children and their underpaid counselor will be needlessly sweating under their mask, playing color war in 90-degree heat. Don't listen to them.
Right.
And it kind of goes back to what you used to write about, Karol, about the pajama class. Like, there's this group of people that don't really care about how annoying it is for regular people to do this.
Right. The pajama class has had a really wonderful pandemic. They've had things brought to their house. They've had food delivered. They've had Amazon boxes at their door every day. And they don't really understand why we're in such a hurry to get back to the offices and why we're in such a hurry to restart society again, because things kind of went really well for them. And this is just a continuation of that, where they are not camp counselors. They don't know what camp counselors would go through. And they have never experienced being outside for 6 to 7 hours in heat, running around, playing games, playing sports, swimming, and then putting a mask on. And it's really telling that they don't know anything about what that life would be like and don't really care about prescribing things that don't make any sense.
Right. And then you also talk about, and I noticed that you were one of the only people on social media to kind of pick up on the audacity of the CDC making one guidance, I should say, for pregnant women, and then about 4 or 5 days later, changing it pretty drastically. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I thought it was a big deal, Karol, but apparently everyone else was just kind of like, oh, whatever.
Right. Well, so a lot of the pushback that I've gotten over the last, 6 months to maybe even a year is listen to the CDC guidelines. Listen to the CDC guidelines. Well, their guidelines are, again, often contradictory, don't make any sense, and often change. So what we had was, on a Friday, the CDC head Walensky said that pregnant people should get vaccinated. And then a few days later, the CDC walked this back and said, no, our guidance hasn't changed. Pregnant people can get vaccinated. Basically, they went from should get vaccinated to a neutral, up to you kind of thing. And again, so if we're supposed to follow CDC guidance on things, here's a great example of where they have completely slipped, either made a mistake or we don't really know what's going on there. And it's completely anti-science, and we don't know where we're supposed to go after this kind of thing happens. And so I can't abide by just follow CDC guidelines.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, Karol, I'm speaking with Karol Markowicz from the New York Post and from Spectator US, is Biden's take on schools reopening, because you're a really outspoken supporter of reopening the schools and getting kids back to normal. And I often have people on who are really passionate about that, and I understand why. Biden seems to be kind of just wishy-washy on it. I want to play you this cut of his take. Now, this is the leader of the free world. One thing you could always say about Donald Trump is that on most important issues, he had a strong opinion. You might not like his opinion, but you at least knew what it was. Listen to Joe Biden, cut 7.
Kids in K through 12 schools obviously are not going to be able to get the vaccine by the fall. Should all schools in this country be open this fall for 5 day a week in-person learning regardless?
Based on the science and the CDC, they should probably all be open. There's not overwhelming evidence that there's much of a transmission among these people, young people.
Now, this is an issue that people have been debating and, petitioning for and going to committee meetings. And his big takeaway is they should probably be opened. What do you think about that?
That made me crazy. The thing is, most schools are open. If you look at a map of the country, most schools across the country are open. It's just in the very liberal areas like New York, like Boston, like California, like Portland, and so on, that they aren't open, or they've only opened on a part-time basis, or they have Zoom in a room where the kids go into school and they learn via Zoom from a teacher who's at home. So, most schools have managed to do this, and yet the very liberal areas, which are beholden to these anti-science teachers unions, have been completely unsuccessful. And I think Joe Biden knows that. He knows which schools it is that aren't open at this point, and he's trying to protect them.
Right. And you talk a lot about New York. I know you're from there. I know you guys have plenty of issues in New York right now, but I just want to, not that it's a competition, Karol, but in Brookline, Massachusetts, which, by the way, is the second most educated town in the country, they will not be ending the outdoor mask mandate. They're overruling the CDC because I think it makes them feel better to wear masks. And I want to talk about this mental element of this. There's something about this that has really transfixed people, where it's become more like a religion than a science.
Right. It's both a religion and obviously a virtue signal. It says that I am on the left because I'm not one of these people who have taken off my mask like Republicans have. It really is an in-crowd kind of thing. I'm done with mask wearing. My kids aren't wearing masks. Like that's it for us. I've been vaccinated. I'm moving on with my life. I don't care what the rest of the people are going to be doing. But it's really wild that the most educated, the people who in this house we believe in science, signs on their lawns, are the ones who really don't believe in science and don't really trust the vaccines. Honestly, it sends a message that they don't believe the vaccines work and that they will continue masking despite being vaccinated. So it's so crazy to me that this is where we are, but the pandemic has become really religious to some people, and I'm sorry, I have my own religion already.
No, I totally agree with you, and I think there was a story today about fully vaccinated liberals are scared to take off their masks out of, just like you said, being feared that they'll be seen as Republican. And in my mind, I'm just thinking the stakes of virtue signaling are getting higher and higher. Like I used to think it was one thing to put a bumper sticker on your car or a lawn sign, hate has no home here, or whatever it might be. But wearing a mask on your face and kind of missing out on life just to prove that you are not a MAGA hat person is a new level.
Yeah, and if they wore the mask because they continued to be worried, again, that would be questionable if they were vaccinated and mean that they don't believe in the vaccines. But if they do believe in the vaccines, if they don't believe that they're a risk, if they don't believe they're at risk, and they're still wearing a mask just to show that they're on a certain political side, I mean, it's sick. It's genuinely sick.
Genuinely sick. I think that's the place I want to end this interview. Karol Markowicz, thank you very much. Everyone should check out Karol. At Karol is her Twitter, Karol, and she just has some of the best pieces of work you're going to find on this, especially everything to do with masking and kids in school and kids in camp, and she's just a fabulous writer. Thank you very much, Karol. All right, the Biden administration's policies and executive orders are already causing some economic disturbance. Tax laws are going to change. I had an entire conversation with someone about this because they were selling their property, Jared, and they're so nervous about this tax burden that's going to be put on them in the next couple months that they're in a rush to sell their property. And I think sometimes when you're in a rush, you can make some bad decisions. So you want to be protected. You want to have somebody on your side. And that's where JJ Manning Auctioneers comes in. Your tax burden on selling real estate will grow. Don't get caught flat-footed and squander the equity in your real estate built up over years or decades. Sell today with JJ Manning. For over 40 years, JJ Manning has been the leading auction house in New England. From high-end homes to estates to commercial properties throughout New England, JJ Manning can get your property sold fast and contingency-free. There's a big reason why Mass Lawyers Weekly voted JJ Manning #1 for 4 consecutive years in a row. And here's the reason. They have a huge following of bidders who pay cash. When you sell with a broker, you pay the commission. But in an auction, the buyer pays. These are treacherous times in the real estate market. Some sectors are at all-time highs and they're just booming, but others are losing ground. So don't wait until Joe Biden destroys this sector of the economy too before you cash out. To learn more on how to get your property sold fast, contact Charlie Gill at jjmanning.com. With over 16,000 sales and satisfied clients, you can be the next one. Call them today at 1-800-521-0111 or go to jjmanning.com and get your property sold. We'll be back on the other side. We'll open up the lines and take some of your calls. We also have some Andrew Cuomo sound, I hear, and Jared is shaking his head, which makes me think this is worth listening to. We'll be back. Don't go anywhere. It's The Grace Curley Show.
You're listening to The Grace Curley Show.